So there's a great boogeyman, and this boogeyman is very scary. And anybody that is this boogeyman gets labeled the name of the boogeyman. The boogeyman is so frightening and scary that everyone who doesn't agree with you is the boogeyman. Of course, I speak of not an actual boogeyman, but I hear the label being thrown around a lot. And no, I'm not referring to Nazi. Surprisingly enough, I think we all kind of understand what a Nazi truly is. However, there is a difference. There is a thing that has been molded and changed over time. And ironically enough, those that seem to think that they're not, in fact, are. It's amazing. I, of course, speak of a fascist.
Yes, sir. They are very tricky. Hard to catch.
Now, I'm going to show you something real quick, and I think it's ironically stupid. So, without further ado, what I have before you is the definition of a fascist. At least, according to Wikipedia, which we all know is run by social justice warrior morons. Those that are greatly informed about the in-depth nature of a fascist, I'm sure, because they like to rewrite history, they like to redefine words, they like to change the meaning of things in order to suit their narrative, so of course they can be trusted to redefine the term fascist when they throw it around like nobody's business. According to them, Trump is a fascist. Well, let's look at their definition of fascism real quick. Is a form of radical right-wing, authoritarian ultranationalism characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and strong regimental society and of the economy. Yeah, which came to, 20th century history, all that fun stuff. So they go into a little bit of it. Opposed to liberalism, Marxism, anarchism, fascism is placed on the right wing, or far right, as they put it, within traditional left-right spectrum. No, it is not, in fact, a traditional right-wing position, as much as you want to define it as that. I disagree with your definition here, for various reasons. Let's jump over to Encyclopedia Britannica, shall we? I seem to trust them slightly more.
Do it again.
Although fascist parties and movements differ significantly from one another, they had many characteristics in common, including extreme militaristic nationalism. We'll get to that in a second. Contempt for the electoral democracy. Yeah, I wonder who has contempt for the Electoral College at this point. And a political and cultural liberalism. Yes. A belief in a natural social hierarchy and the rule of the elites, and the desire to create Volksgemeinschaft, the people's community, in which individual interest would be subordinate to the good of the nation. So, I want to point out a few very interesting things out of this particular description of a fascist. Let's start with the first thing, militaristic nationalism. This seems to be a commonality because at the time, at least when it was formed, they were very militaristic when it came to their national identity. And it's because of the First World War, they were kind of put into a position where they didn't know what it meant to be German anymore. So, what happened was, they centered around this common theme, a better German, a better Italian, whatever. And this very concept basically was the center point to which people could rally behind, a rallying cry. It's not necessarily militaristic nationalism that defines a fascist anymore. It is militaristic commonality, or group, that I would put it together with. Not necessarily a nationalist. You could be a globalist and still be militaristic, could you not? I do believe you could. You could be a ally to people of color and intersectional feminism. And that's your in-group. And still be militaristic, couldn't you? I'm pretty sure you could. Contempt for the electoral democracy. No greater group than socialism has a contempt for democracy, because democracy is giving the power to the people to make decisions to put leadership in its place. Of course, socialism is actually more aligned with a economic structure, so you'd have to more point to communism for this, that they would rather have the power of the people being in charge and no elites. Fascism, according to Wikipedia, has this wrong. Because, according to Wikipedia, fascism is defined as having a power to the elites. It's all about power, centralized power. No, actually, it was a communist movement. It was people's power. They were the People's Party. Socialist movement within Nazi Germany was about the people, for the people, by the people. They were centered around the German people. Just because they happened to be nationalists did not segregate their group. So, if you have contempt for an electoral college and want to abolish it, I wonder what kind of group you are. Because that is power to the minority, not the majority. Meaning that the farmers, the rural, the not so populated Central America, not Central United States, sorry, not Central America, they're crazy socialists at this point. Those people have the true power within this country, not the coastal cities, not the elites. So if you have contempt for an electoral democracy, which we are, where the power of the people is given to the minority, not the majority, meaning rural countries, not cities, then clearly you have a problem with the West. Political and cultural liberalism. For anybody that's been center-left, such as myself, even left of me, have noticed that social justice warriors are not liberal. They are definitely not for liberal values. They are not progressive. In fact, they are regressive. They are not for equal opportunity. They're not for equal treatment or fair treatment. They're for one rule for me, one rule for thee. They're a hypocrisy in its finest. In fact, you can't go down the intersectional road of feminism or any of the sections of social justice and not find a complete hypocrisy at the end. Not that I've seen thus far. So if they have a contempt for political and cultural liberalism, what could be more identified than segregating people by their skin and their sex and their sexual preference in order to categorize them and give them a hierarchy to which you can oppress top down? Almost as if the one that has the most oppression points has the most power. So I guess in a way you could actually apply the Wikipedia definition of the elites to this one particular group. Could you not? I mean, their elites are not necessarily the wealthy. They're the most oppressed according to their definitions. Of course, they're not oppressed. They only perceive oppression. A belief in natural social hierarchy. Well, that is not what they believe in. In this case, it is an unnatural social hierarchy. They believe that because of your skin, there therefore must be a hierarchy of who is better and who is worse. Ironically, these people that think that the white privilege and whiteness somehow give us benefits are white supremacists in their own logic. Of course, they fail to acknowledge this, meaning that all the black social justice warriors are really white supremacists, which is absolutely amazing. I have more respect for the Hotep Nation at this point because they don't have their head up their ass. They recognize their skin tone and don't kowtow and bow down to other people. But at the same time, they aren't a massive bag of dicks either. I mean, they have their moments, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, they're not crazy. And desire to create oh my God, my German sucks. Volksgemeinschaft. God damn. Blah, 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 blah. Volksgemeinschaft. I hate it when they take multiple words and kind of put them together. It's really fucking annoying. But that's German for you. Which individual interests would be subordinate to the good of the nation. Tell me, where is individuality lost within this country? Is it on the right, as you would put it? Or is it on the left? They think in group rights. The group over the individual. If you are a white person, you must think of the group as a whole and put yourself in kowtow ever begging solidarity with your allies of color because you are white. And there is never going to be a position where you can rise above your station because they group by skin color. So you're fucked. You're staying at the bottom of the barrel. So grovel while you can, you miserable slave. That's what I find interesting about this concept of fascism. And I thought I'd point it out because, you know, since they claim that ultra-nationalism is and right-wing is fascist, hold on a second. It's easy to describe a group as a fascist if you fit multiple categories, just by reasoning it out just a little bit, don't you think?
That's strange. That's the question I want to ask you.
Now, I wanted to point this out for one very specific reason. Those that seem to run around calling somebody a fascist and then trying to beat the shit out of them are indeed the fascists. They're using the word to gain power. The one that they're insulting is sideswiped by this because they're like, I'm not a fascist. Hell, most people in this country don't even know what the fuck that word means, to be honest. They run around thinking, you know, fascist, oh, Nazi Germany, oh, Mussolini, oh, I heard that word once before. Aren't they really bad people that, like, use violence for stuff? The common term, the common definition, if you will, doesn't really follow suit with what we saw in Wikipedia or Encyclopedia Britannica. No, the colloquial, God, I can't even say that fucking word. The cultural term that fascism kind of centers around, I guess you could say, is that the people that use violence for political gain. But that actually fits a different term now, doesn't it? It fits terrorism, which is violence, physical acts of violence for a political or religious motive. Although terrorism is often associated with religion, not necessarily politics. Maybe, sort of. I mean, the New Zealand asshole that shot up a bunch of people in a Muslim mosque was a white supremacist. If you've read his manifesto, which many have by now, if you haven't, it's a good insight into crazy people and how they went crazy. Of course, people blame YouTube and the media, you know, the usual suspects. They never bother to read where it really came from. But he was radicalized, obviously, for a political goal. But is he a terrorist or is he a fascist? I would argue that he's probably a fascist, not necessarily a terrorist. Although they could be one and the same. And here's why I say that this definition, this little twist that we have here, is actually kind of a mix. And the reason why I say that is political power seems to be the crux of what determines a fascist versus a terrorist. If you've grown big enough within a political party to where you have media attention and support, political attention and support, Portland, mayor, asshole, and you have multiple backings within one particular party, you're not considered a terrorist. You're fighting hate. You're fighting evil people according to your own ideology. You label them a fascist, and then you beat them up. But in fact, the other side of the aisle, the Federal Bureau of Investigation in particular, has labeled this group fascist. Or no, I'm sorry, terrorist. But what's the difference? See, I would argue that terrorism is a minority group without any support within the government, within social, within political power. And they target civilians in particularly, sometimes military installations, depends on what kind of attention they want. And then they kill massive amounts of people, all in the name of their political or religious ideology. That is a terrorist, right? Fascists do the same thing, but they have presence, they have power. So the only difference between a fascist and a terrorist at this point is who has power and how much do they have of it. Within terrorism, you don't have any power. Within fascism, you do. So I thought I'd twist this around a little bit, kind of give you a little definition and some philosophical thought when it comes to fascism. They throw that label around a lot. They like to call people fascists. In fact, you know you're not, so there's no use contending with them. Just be prepared, because if they call you that, they're probably going to take a swing, because now they feel justified in violence, because they're fascist. They label, they identify their enemy, and then they attack. Just like Mussolini's brown shirts, I believe it was, did back in the day. Except in this case, they wear all black and cover their faces like terrorists. Because they have, well, I was going to say they have no pride, but that's not necessarily true. They do have pride in what they think they're doing is right. But what they don't have is confidence. They must hide their faces because they know what they're doing is wrong. And they know that there's laws against it. So if they got caught, they're going to jail, and that's the end of it. This is probably where they belong. But to be honest, the more you allow these fascist groups to roam around and do whatever the hell they want, run a city, Portland, ran by fascists. The mayor is a fascist because he enables these people. Then the worse it's going to get. The bigger it's going to get. And the closer we get to all-out civil war. Because once you silence the people that are not allowed to speak, once you dictate and control what they can and cannot say, what's left? If you're not allowed to express your opinions and you think you can control thought, the only thing left is violence. That has been the history of our people going back as far as we could record it. Every time a tyrannical system got in the way and decided to exert its power and force people into its ideology, violence occurred. Dissident, and then violence. Unfortunately, this intersectional feminism has its military arm. There is no military arm against them. It's only words, and they're not afraid of them. They, of course, say words cause violence, which gives them justification to use violence in the end. But in what's funny about that is they are indeed using fascism to stop people from speaking. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little bit of a twist, I think. Everybody could see it, the writing on the wall, but I wanted to make it crystal clear that the difference between these two groups, terrorist and fascist, there's not much difference. The left wing has become, just because they're not nationalists, they're still politically aligned to the same group. And they are trying to control a nation, in fact, the globe, at this point. One country at a time, it seems. Because UK's all but lost. Germany's all but lost. Many other countries have fallen to this nonsense. New Zealand, Australia. The only place that seems to have an ironclad solution against these sons of bitches is the United States. And why? Because the Constitution trumps the rest of you. And you hate it. Thus, you must hate the electoral democracy. So, I've come around full circle. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I definitely wanted to cover this subject. It's been on my list for a very long time. I nailed it, I hope. There's not much else to say. If somebody comes at you swinging a fascist and they have 10 people around them, just run. If it's 1 or 2 and you know how to fight, make sure they can't fight again. I would not be surprised if many more people got hurt or killed at this point, because all they know how to do is violent. All they know how to do is throw that fist, throw that brick. Why? Because their political ideology is hypocritical. It has no weight. Join us or die. That is their theme. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.
The class is finished today.